Hello YouTube, this is Mike. Alright, we'll see if I end up keeping this video on or if I delete it. I'm a little tired. Just getting over some kind of a stomach flu bug, so anyway. But I wanted to continue to talk about empathy. I've been thinking about that a lot in regards to healing from narcissistic abuse. And I've been thinking a lot about, I think some limitations in our thinking about what empathy is and the implications of empathy. I think it's far overrated, and I think the whole discussion about empathy in regards to personality disorders and toxic behavior and all of that, I think on both sides of the issue, I think it ends up being creates a destructive narrative that helps people who are, quote, sociopathic. It helps them stay sociopathic in their behavior, and it justifies destructive behavior in those people who believe themselves to be highly empathic. And so I want to talk to you about that. So before we go any further, I am not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a mental health professional. I am not an expert in psychology or personality disorders. To the best of my knowledge, I do not have a personality disorder like BPD or NPD or any cluster B personality disorder. I'm just a human being. And I've created this channel to help, initially to help people who were in toxic relationships with people who either have borderline and or NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm here to help those people, the non-cluster Bs who were damaged in these toxic relationships. I want to share with you what I did to heal from the relationship that I was in. Specifically, I was in a relationship with a woman, a beautiful, wonderful woman who I really can't say enough good things about. In basically every aspect of her, except for the fact that she happened to have untreated, I believe, borderline personality disorder, possibly comorbid with narcissistic personality disorder. And the damage that I experienced, the pain that I experienced, was so debilitating and so horrific that I started this channel for my own healing. I did the 4 things that I recommend everybody does. I did that, and in a matter of 2 months, I was completely healed from that relationship. Bear in mind, you're not me. It may take you longer to heal, but that's really what I'm here to do. Having said that, I want to talk about this. So I'm fascinated with the whole super empath narrative. I'm fascinated with that because my experience is that when I watch the super empath YouTube channels, my experience is that what I hear and feel from them is absolute total rage. Now, I suppose somebody could make the argument that that's my projection on them, but I don't think so. I'm pretty connected to my feelings most of the time. And one thing I'm not, I don't have a problem identifying within myself is anger. The 2 things that I ask people to do on these live chats is to either ask me an honest question, which means you're asking me about something that you think I might know that you don't know, or that you share an honest feeling. An honest feeling is I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm confused, I'm upset, I'm frightened. When you say this, I feel this. When I hear that, it makes me think of this. That's what I want. Those are the two things I want. I'm okay if I don't get that, but those are the things that I want from the interaction, because what I seek to be is I seek to be, to the best of my ability, as authentically human as I can be. So let me tell you other things I am not. As I've said, I'm not a borderline, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not a narcissist. I don't have any cluster B personality disorder. I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm also not a super empath. I'm also not a Heyoka. I'm also not a starseed. I'm also not a light worker. I'm also not an earth angel. I'm trying to think of any other, terms. What I find interesting about that, again, the whole idea of somebody being an empath, along with the word empath would mean humility. So an empath, in order to be an empath, you can't be wrapped up in yourself. You have to have some humility. It takes humility to be able to put yourself in somebody else's position. It takes humility to seek to see, look at somebody at the same level as you are, or put yourself at their level, try and understand them from their perspective. But what I find interesting about the super empath is that, first, it was just, there's this spectrum. The spectrum, and this isn't just in the super empath. The super empaths, I think, got this from psychology, which I think psychology is at a loss in this one regard. And I'm going to share with you my criticisms about how, at least I've seen and heard psychologists talk about empathy in regards to their diagnosis of personality disordered people, and especially narcissism. But we'll get to that. But what I find interesting about the super empaths is that I imagine that it first started out with people calling themselves empaths, because psychologists will tell you, at least, I don't know, I can't speak for all psychologists, and especially since I'm not a psychologist myself. This is just what I've heard. So who knows how educated I am about this or not. But in terms of what I've heard, psychologists will say there's a spectrum. And on the one end, you have sensitive, empathic. And on the other end, you have psychopathy, which means no empathy. You don't care about other people, your actions. People don't really exist. They're just objects. So on the one end, you have the empath who identifies, who feels very strongly, has strong sensitivity to other people's feelings and emotions, cares for them, wants to nurture and take care of them. That's the empath on one side. On the other side is the psychopath. On the far end of the spectrum is the psychopath, who is toxic, potentially abusive, can do anything because they don't care, because you don't exist, you're just an object, and they're narcissists. They only see from within their narcissism. And if you want to know where the word narcissist comes from, all you have to do is Google the myth of Narcissus, who was enraptured by his own reflection. He bends down, looks at himself in the pool, and he's very beautiful, and he sees this beautiful person staring back at him, which is his own reflection. And he can't leave or go anywhere because all he can do is just look at himself. So that's the narrative about the narcissist, and that's not actually accurate. The narrative that the narcissist only sees themselves and that the empath only sees the other is not accurate. And I think it's destructive. But again, talking about the empath, the super empath movement, I find it interesting that the empaths want to identify themselves as these humble, loving, sensitive, empathic, emotional. They have access to their emotions, and they care about others. But first you have empath, and then empath becomes super empath. And of course, they'll tell you that the narrative is that, they'll basically say that the whole aspect of the world, the most important aspect of the world is the empath, the war between the empath and the narcissist. And so they define their entire existence, and in fact yours and my entire existence, based on this war between the empath and the narcissist. And all you have to do is go onto YouTube, and you'll see no shortage of videos titled "The Super Empath Destroys the Narcissist." You will find no shortage of them. And in order to take that position, just to get into that headspace, you have to be in a psychopathic state. Because in order to judge the narcissist as worthy of destruction, you must have no empathy for them. And so I find that ironic, if not outright hypocritical, that those who claim to have the most emotion in the world are in fact spend all of their time and energy destroying or seeking to destroy without empathy other people. And there's there's not even the slightest bit of desire to have empathy, for whatever it is that the psychopath has endured to become a psychopath. So they're not just an empath, they're the super empath. And since, and again, the super empath is what? Super means above. So right there, you've lost all the humility. There's no humility there. You're not looking at somebody directly one-on-one. You're not empathizing with anybody. You're now above everybody. But even a super empath, isn't enough. Then you have to become a heyoka. So the heyoka, I don't even know what that is, but that's been appropriated from Native American mythology or religion. I'm quite sure, completely out of context and without permission from Native Americans. I'm quite sure about that. So then somebody is a heyoka or a sacred clown. But if that's not good enough, then you get to be a star seed. And that means that you're not even human. You are from another star constellation, and you're not human anymore. You're beyond human. That's why you have so much empathy. Or you're an earth angel, which again, you're not even a human, you're an angel. And you hear these people talk about, I'm not human, I'm actually an angel in human form. So the irony is, here you have these people who supposedly, if they're an empath, they have sensitivity, they have the ability to get inside of you and sit in your skin and understand you, to see you at your level. And yet there's nothing but complete lack of empathy, because they're out to destroy a whole class of people that they term the narcissist. And they're condescending to everything other than themselves. And even, I was talking about this today. I was lovingly harsh with somebody earlier today. For me, it's nighttime, so wherever the heck you are, it might be 3 o'clock in the morning, it might be the next day. For me, it's still the same day. I was chatting with somebody, and I was giving him a really hard time because he was talking about how, his borderline ex depended on him. And I just said, how condescending of you to sit there and, you're acting like you say you care, but you're looking down on them like they're these infants that depend on you for everything. And I said, where's the empathy? I don't know what I said, but the feeling was, where's the empathy in that? There isn't any. You're so full of yourself. You're so condescending and so judgmental, even when you're full of all this, quote, empathy, as your eyes are filling with tears, saying, I have to save the poor, stupid borderline from themselves. It's very narcissistic. And that goes against the understanding of narcissism, because if you listen to the superficial definition of narcissism, a narcissist is somebody who has no empathy. And that's just simply not true. And the fact of somebody having empathy means that they're not a narcissist is also not true. Because in the example I just gave, the person who is projecting onto the borderline that they're these helpless infants that are so incapable of protecting themselves that other people are going to harm them, that the nasty world is going to destroy them. That's obviously their projection of how they feel about themselves. So all of the feeling that they have as they cry tears of empathy for the poor borderline that I have to, if only they would let me love them. They're completely clueless to the fact that it's 100% their projection, that they don't see the borderline for who they are. They don't see the borderlines as humans. They see the borderlines as people talk about narcissists, their supply. So the codependent, who's the empath, actually gets their supply from saving others. And there's a whole category of narcissists out there who live like this. And we call them covert narcissists or inverted narcissists. There's all kinds of different words out there, but it means the same thing. It means that this is a type of narcissist that completely gets their narcissistic supply from feeling needed, appreciated, and they will seek out people whom they can ingratiate themselves to. They'll even allow themselves to become victimized, brutalized, and abused so that they can be invaluable to the other person. But it's, there's no difference in that essence than there is from the codependent, who gets all of their value from saving the less fortunate. So, I mean, this is, I was just listening to one of the super empaths earlier today, and I'm going to, these aren't this person's exact words, but something to the effect of, they're super empath because I have so much feeling, I care so much for those that are hurting that, in my, this, I'm speaking for somebody else now. In my business, full of people, when the one person comes in who's full of pain, I rush to take care of that person because I'm a super empath. And that's not what I heard at all. What I heard was, that's your narcissistic supply. Because the only way that you feel valuable is when you're fixing somebody from a condescending place of superiority. They're hurting, you have the answer, right? And you're going to go and give them what they need because you're the super empath. And there's nothing empathic about that. When I remember when my father passed away, when I was 35, so that was 20-something years ago. Is that right? Anyway, it was a long time ago. Anyway, my father passed away, and I was in a movie. By the way, the placeholder on YouTube, you see that picture of the guy with blood on his. That's actually me. In 2000, I was in a movie, and I played a kickboxer, and that was, in between scenes, the photographer came and took a picture of me. But I was doing a film, and my father was in the process of dying. So I wasn't at home with my father while he was dying. I was off shooting a film. And so I was a wreck. And I would be on the set in between scenes, and I would just break down in tears. Now, if you've ever had a death in the family, you know it's different. There's like this physical thing that takes over, and your body will heave, and it will start to, you'll cry in like this deep, you'll really mourning, but it's not, you won't be thinking anything. Your body will just all of a sudden go into these heaving, sobs. And, people would come and try and fix me. And I had to just get away from them because it's like, you're not helping me. You're making yourself feel better by trying to cheer me up, and I don't need that. I'm going through whatever I'm going through, and just, leave me alone. And there was the fellow actress in there who I had gone to college with. She would come over and she would sit next to me. And sometimes she would just hold my hand. She wouldn't do anything. She would just sit there next to me. Either if I was just sitting there or if I was sobbing, and she wouldn't say anything. And at one point I told her, I said, "Thank you so much. You have no idea how meaningful that is to me." And, just somebody being there with me in my pain. And she says, "You don't remember, do you?" And I said, "Remember what?" She said, "You did that for me. My brother died." This was when we were in college, and everybody was trying to fix me, and you just would come and sit next to me, and you wouldn't say anything, and you would say, "You don't need any fixing. I'm just here with you. You go ahead and have whatever." And she said that was really helpful for me. That's empathy. That's empathy. Just letting somebody be who they are. Having to find the person in pain and rushing to them with your narcissistic superiority, your condescension as you look down on them, and you're going to talk them out of their negative feelings, and you go get them, tiger, and things aren't that bad. The whole denial. As I was watching, the videos today, what I saw when because I'm to be honest, I'm listening because I'm trying to find something in it. I go, there's something in this whole super empath thing. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something I'm not getting here. And so I'm listening there's got to be some nuggets of good information, some healing knowledge and wisdom. There's got to be something. I was trying to put my judgment aside. I was examining myself because I respond, I have this negative response to them. You've heard me in some of my videos, I really slice them apart. But I really wanted to put that aside and see, is there something I'm missing here? Because this is really, look at how popular this is. But I couldn't escape the feeling that, number one, I didn't hear any actual recovery in terms of here's what you do to recover from your trauma. I didn't hear any of that. What I heard was a lot of superficial one-liners telling you how to deny your feelings. So for instance, one was that anxiety is excitement. And so I didn't hear all of it, but the idea was that, if you feel anxious, it really means that you're excited. And it wasn't that. It was sort of like you could change it. You're feeling anxious? No, you're excited. It's an opportunity. And then the phrase that was used, when anxiety comes to you, as though it's coming from somewhere outside of you. Again, very passive. But what I heard in that was denial. Because that's not accurate. Anxiety is not excitement. You don't have a choice between the two. The idea that if you have a negative feeling, you can, if you don't like that feeling and you don't want to tolerate it, you can snap your fingers and turn it into something else. And when I listen to these super empaths talk, especially when they're talking about destroying the narcissist, there's this level of, their voice, the tenor of their voice raises, and there's this intensity that starts coming out of them, which makes me uncomfortable. Like I can't listen to it. It makes me want to say, just take a breath and calm down. Just stop overcompensating, because that's what it feels like. It feels like somebody who's overcompensating for their insecurity. It feels like somebody who would be a cocaine addict otherwise, because they need the cocaine to, a coffee addict, a cocaine addict, some kind of, they need to take some kind of stimulant in order to boost themselves up, and that's where they get, their confidence. So they need something to give them a boost of confidence, which is really, people compensating for their lack of confidence, their insecurity, their anxiety. And so just because you're trying to change your feelings into something else because you have a judgment against it, number one, there's a judgment there. So, if you're not anxious, you're excited. Well, there's a judgment that anxiety is bad, that you're bad for having anxiety. If you're sad, no, there's a silver lining. Be hopeful. It's a good thing. Life goes on, and like if somebody's mourning, it's like, you can't. If you're angry, you're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to be sad. You're not allowed to be angry. And so I much prefer if somebody is authentically allowing themselves to have their feelings, whatever they are. But I get really uncomfortable around people whom I perceive to be trying to hide their feelings, stuff their feelings, or arbitrarily trying to change their feeling from something bad to something good, like anxiety to excitement. It's just denial, and it's self-destructive. And I get really reactive when I feel like I'm with somebody who's being self-destructive and full of denial. And I get reactive to my experience of their insecurity. Not so much their insecurity. I'm okay with people being insecure, but I'm not okay with people who are wrestling with that insecurity and judging themselves for it and pretending to be full of confidence when they're obviously not. So those are some of my thoughts about the super empath. Let me now talk about how the word empathy is used. At least I've heard some people, which I think the super empaths have taken, again, they've appropriated it from psychology, taken it and spiritualized it and, looked at it very superficially as a way of avoiding their feelings. I'm not a codependent, I'm an empath. I'm not just an empath, I'm a super empath. Because an empath can be taken advantage of, but I'm not just super empath, I'm a heyoka. Not only am I a heyoka, I'm a starseed. Not only a starseed, I'm a light worker. I'm actually an earth angel, I'm not human. I'm impervious to that human pain. I just love everybody unconditionally. Anyway, so psychology, they will classify. Psychology is a science, and so sciences do that. They like to classify things. I like the classification of what is it? Sorry, give me a second here to remember. Neurosis versus psychosis. I like that distinction because neurosis means you're crazy, you're nuts, but you have an integrated self, and you don't dissociate, you don't hallucinate, you have a clear understanding of the progression of time, but you're still nuts. So you don't, quote, have a disorder, but you can still be really messed up, really toxic. You can still, commit suicide, or, you can do all kinds of crazy, hurtful, destructive things. But you have something that gives you the ability to stay in objective reality. You just don't like it. So neurosis could be you are in objective reality, but you really don't like it. Whereas psychosis is when somebody doesn't have a clear identity, or doesn't have an identity, doesn't have a clear understanding of time from A to B, one day to the next, past, present, and future. They dissociate from objective external reality. And they often can't tell the difference between their internal reality and the objective external reality. So that's the difference. That's the disorder. The disorder is when you've got somebody who's neurotic, but now they're no longer fully integrated with objective reality. So I like that because it creates it creates an understanding. So when I'm dealing with people on this channel, I'm focusing on people who are neurotic. And trust me, if you're on this channel, you're neurotic. Just get over it. It's okay. I'm neurotic too. It means that you have some issues that you're trying to deal with and work through, and you're having a hard time getting past the pain of, the neurosis of codependence, which is created when you choose to stay in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist. So you are neurotic if you're on this channel. Just stop doubling down. Stop pretending to be superior. Stop telling us you're an empath or a starseed. Just, have the respect and be a human being like the rest of us. I forgot where I was going. In any case, I like that distinction because it makes a clear understanding, in terms of if you're with a the borderline has a personality disorder. So they are in the psychosis range. And that's an important distinction to make because if somebody doesn't have if somebody doesn't have a psychosis, then you have a much better chance, listen to my words, I'm not saying it's impossible, but you have a much better chance of being able to deal with that person rationally. They can want to split. They can feel distrustful. They can feel judgmental. They can be afraid of intimacy. They can, intimacy avoidant, all these words. They can have that. But if they're just neurotic and you're with them, you can talk them down. You can say, let's talk it over. And you have a much better chance of finding a middle ground, and they have a much better chance of being able to tolerate their conflicting feelings and taking constructive action, which is what you want. You want to be in a relationship with somebody that when they're upset with you or frightened with you or something, that you can talk with them rationally, share your feelings, and even when they're uncomfortable or unhappy, they will still stay with you. A good example is, I've seen this in numerous movies, but the movies where the woman is in love with the guy and the guy is immature and he goes off and he cheats on his wife, has sex on the side with whatever, prostitutes or, whoever it is or whatever. And then you get to the end of the movie and they're resolving it and he's had a whole life change and he comes back and he says, I realize I did that because, and he gives the reasons why he did that. And he says, I know I don't deserve it, but I've realized that you're the one for me. And if you'll take me back, I can guarantee you, yes, I still have these feelings. I still have difficulty staying in one place. One person is boring to me, but I would much rather have the love of one person and have the stability. And if you'll hold my hand and work through the pain with me, I promise I will never do that to you again. And then, whenever I hear this response, I always find it, I have a lot of respect and admiration because I don't know that I could do it. But, then the woman will say, all right, I forgive you. Or, okay, we'll stay together or let's get married or whatever it is. And then as they're walking off, they kiss and they hug. And as they're walking off, she'll say, it's going to take me a while to get over this. And he says, I know, and I understand. And so there you have two people who are willing to stay with each other in spite of their feelings. And they accept the other person with their feelings. So in this case, the female in this example gets over her narcissism of wanting to be the only woman that he's attracted to. She has to accept the fact that he's going to be attracted to other women. And so if she's sitting there with him out to dinner and he looks at the waitress's ass as the waitress walks by, she's going to understand that that's just him. That's how he feels. She's not going to take it personally. And she knows that he's going to take that lust for the waitress and bring it home. So she has to get over her narcissism, her sensitivity, her jealousy, and accept him as he is. And he has to accept her, because even though he's apologized and even though he's done something very difficult and he has made himself vulnerable by revealing the truth to her, she has told him, I can't completely, totally forgive you. I'm going to be hurt and angry for a while, but we're going to be together. I'm going to be here with you. And there are going to be times that I'm with you that I'm not going to want to be with you. There's times that we're going to be making love and I'm not going to feel turned on because I'm still hurt about what you did. And he accepts that. He allows that hit to his ego, because what he wants is he wants that young waitress who's going to be hot for him and be turned on physically. And he wants that rush. And instead he's got to be with somebody who's going through the motions and just doing it because you want it. And it's going to hurt his ego, but he's going to love her anyway. And this is what happens with psychosis. People who have codependence, if you do the 4 things I tell you to do, this is what you learn how to do. So you have a much better chance of fixing things up with somebody who's psychotic. Excuse me, not psychotic. Neurotic. Sorry, if I said psychotic, I meant neurotic. You have a much better chance of working things out with somebody who's neurotic than psychotic, because neurotic just means I don't like what I see, I don't like what I feel, but I see what ultimate reality is, and I can, I'm dealing with it. Whereas psychotic says I don't accept reality. I'm either incapable or I refuse. And this is what happens when the borderline splits on you. When the narcissist discards you. By the way, discard, it bothers me spelling. I want people to be educated and know how to spell. Discard is D-I-S-C-A-R-D. Discard. It means to throw away. Discard with a G means to throw your guard away, and that's not what discard is. Discard means you're throwing somebody away. You're discarding it like trash. So when you get discarded by the borderline or the narcissist, they are not seeing you for who you are, and they are not seeing objective reality. When the borderline splits after having the best lovemaking the night before and the pillow talk, and in my case, not only promising to be my best friend, not only promising to give me her spare car. I mean, I didn't even ask for it. She just said, I'll give you my spare car and I'll always be here for you. And I promise I'll be there and I'll text you and I'll be here for you through the holidays. Made all of these promises, and literally because of one phrase, I became the most evil, destructive, unsafe person, and she not only couldn't be with me, she couldn't have any contact with me ever again. That's somebody who you can't sit down and have a conversation with. You can't work things out. You can't even come to any closure because they're not connected to objective reality for whatever reason. They're incapable in that moment to connect with objective reality. And so that's psychosis. And so in that case, that's why I say you have to go no contact. Because the damage that you go through when you try to get that, get to that middle ground with somebody who is not rational, they don't see objective reality, and they refuse to deal with their uncomfortable conflict within them about you. When they're incapable or unwilling to do that, the only thing that will happen is that you will get damaged horrifically. And this is the worst part of it. And so, when I say this to borderlines, like for instance, when my borderline was breaking up with me, or discarding me, which what I did was after that, I then made the decision to go full no contact. I have no idea if she would have hoovered me back or not. I think there's a good chance she might have, but who cares? I don't know. But I forgot what I was saying. At one point, one of her arguments was, I'm breaking up with you. People do it all the time. And other people, you know, when this channel was newer, people, every now and then somebody would come on and say, why are you so upset? Why can't you just get over the fact she broke up with you? Because that's not what happened. People do break up with each other all the time. I've been through breakups. I've broken up with people. But that, as painful as that is and as hard as that is to deal with, it's not the same. Because even if it's neurotic, it's still within the realm of understandable reality. You can still resolve it. You can get closure. C-L-O-S-U-R-E. Again, another word people misspell all the time, drives me crazy. Closure. You can get closure from it, because even though they might be wrong, they might be bad, they might be immature, it still makes sense. You can still be hurt, but it makes sense. And if it makes sense, you'll get over it. You'll heal. You'll be able to explain it to yourself. You know, what didn't happen with, you know, the way my borderline ex wanted to characterize it was, you know, and then later she was saying, you know, and we haven't gotten along and we're always fighting and we're always this. And I'm like, wait, that is not at all what was going on. Do you realize? I mean, I went back 2 weeks later trying to talk to her, and I remember sitting her down, and she was, I would say she was in between facades. She was like, she didn't have a facade, and she really was just sort of floating. And I really got to see what the borderline deals with when they don't have a facade to bolster themselves with. She was really just her true authentic self, which was just this, literally this frightened, like deer in the headlights. And she looked at me and I could see there was no recognition in her eyes. She didn't know who I was. It looked like she was trying to remember who I was. It was really, just looking at her was quite shocking. And then saying to her, trying to say, can you at least understand why this is so confusing to me? And I said, because that night when, and then she remembered the phrase that she didn't like. So she remembered whatever it was that triggered her to create this story in her head about how horrible I was, which is, I used the word magical thinking. So according to her, I used that phrase in order to gaslight her and turn her into this horrible person. And that wasn't what was going on. We were both laughing about each other and ourselves, and we were laughing about how we as humans, we deceive ourselves. And I said something to the effect of, yeah, and your magical thinking did this and mine did that. All she heard was me say the word magical thinking, and that was it. And that turned into, you know, I was this horrible person that had been gaslighting her the whole time, and I've been trying to destroy her, and I'm unsafe and all that. And so I said, and she was saying, you know, people break up with each other all the time, and I broke up with you. It happens all the time. And I said, but that's not what happened. You went literally from one moment of telling me that you're going to give me your car, that I'm your best friend, that we have the best, that no matter what happens, we're going to be the best of friends forever, and wiping the tears. And you went from that to what you're talking about now. And I said, that's not what happens when people break up with each other. People break up with each other because things have been bad for a while. They've been fighting for a while. Things have been getting stale and old for a long time, and it builds up until finally one or both of them breaks up. And that's not what happened. You were madly in love with me and thought I was the best thing in the world, and the next minute I was the worst thing that ever walked the planet. And I'm having a really, really hard time making sense of it. And I just need some closure. And then she completely flipped out. Completely flipped out and literally ran into the house screaming. And then that's what dawned on me. I'm not dealing with somebody who's in my level of reality. She's in a whole other world. And then it all made sense. And all of a sudden I got the closure that I wanted, but it wasn't the closure I was hoping for, which was, there's this satisfaction that comes when you can make sense of things. Even if it's, let's say somebody's been cheating on his wife for a long time and he comes back and he says, you know what, I'm just not, it's because my mom this, and we've been having a problem with that, and it's been building up, and I was too insecure. Even though you can't justify it, it's not okay that he did it, it still makes sense. When it doesn't make sense, it creates this skipping record inside the mind of the non-cluster B person. It creates a cluster B system error. System error does not compute, and that never goes away. It literally never goes away. Which is why I tell you guys, you have to do the 4 things. You don't do the 4 things, you won't heal. That record skipping isn't going to go away. I can tell, by the way, it's not because I'm psychic or because I'm a super heyoka. It's simply because I've done the work. I'm no different than you, and I've done the work. I can tell by your comments whether or not you've done the work. I can tell. I can see it. And if you say things like, yeah, it's been a couple of years, but I still love her. I never want to go back to that ever again, but I still think about her. I still wake up in the middle of the night. The record hasn't stopped skipping yet. You can tell yourself all you want that you're over it and you're healing, but if that's happening, then you're not healed. All right, so I wanted to talk about, I haven't gotten to it yet, but my goal was to talk about how I think psychology is doing borderlines a disservice. Somebody asked me that question earlier, in the similar vein, and got me thinking. But along a little bit of a different line. So in this narrative, which I think is a false, superficial narrative, that there's this spectrum of empath and psychopath, and everybody's somewhere along this spectrum, and the good is the empath and the bad is the psychopath. The good side is empathy and the bad side is no empathy. I think that this is hurtful to borderline's potential recovery. And let me be clear, even though I tell people they should go no contact, if you're with a borderline, you should go no contact. You should, no matter where you are, if you're in the love bombing phase or the devaluation phase, no matter where you are, you need to get the hell out. And you're going to hurt them, possibly, if you leave them. But it's just a matter of time before they do it to you anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Having said that, I do believe that I'd like to believe that borderlines can heal. And in order for that to happen, the stigma of empathy or lack of empathy needs to be destroyed. That's where the real stigma is. And so I think psychologists do borderlines and narcissists, by the way, a disservice by making the judgment of somebody's health based on their empathy level. I think it creates a problem. It creates a justification that keeps the narcissist and the borderline from recovering. Because the message is, if you don't have empathy, you can't act lovingly. The problem is you don't have any empathy. And so because you don't have any empathy, that means you're going to hurt people because you can't understand them and you don't care about them. And that's just simply not true. It's also not true that just because somebody has empathy, that guarantees that they're going to, number one, be that they won't be narcissistic with their empathy, because most empathy is projected, which means it's narcissistic. But even if it's not projected, that doesn't guarantee that somebody's going to act in a way that is helpful and loving to somebody. And it doesn't guarantee that they won't have an intent to cause harm. It also doesn't mean just because somebody has no empathy, which is just a narcissistic experience, by the way. When people say, I'm full of empathy, what they mean is that they feel a lot of emotions. This is why the super empath is the ultimate narcissist, in my opinion, because at least the narcissist knows, yeah, I don't give a shit about anybody. They know they don't care about anybody, and so I do whatever the hell I want because it doesn't bother me. It's like those people who don't have pain receptors, right? And there are people that can, break their limbs and all that, and they don't have any pain. And that's bad for them. They have to act as though they do have pain, like one little girl, I remember hearing about some little girl that had this thing, and she had to wear these big goggles on her face because if not, she would scratch her corneas, like in a bad way, like destroy her eyeballs. So that's what it's like, supposedly. I don't think this is true. As I'm describing it, I don't think it's accurate. But the narcissist believes that. The narcissist believes they have no feelings for anybody else. We believe it. And so we say the narcissist is sociopathic or psychopathic. They have no feelings for anybody else. They see everybody as objects, and so that's why they can be so cruel, because they don't have any empathy. The underlying assumption is that if the narcissist had empathy, they wouldn't be cruel. They wouldn't be selfish, and that's just not true. The thing about emotions, I'm an actor, as you know. In fact, again, if you look at the placeholder, the thumbnail, that's a picture of me in a movie I was in, and I played a narcissist. I played a really bad guy. So this is something I learned about bad guys, by the way. In order to be a convincing bad guy, as an actor, you can't play that they have no emotions, because you won't believe them. People who, this is called, superficial, two-dimensional acting. What you have to play is somebody that has so much emotion that in order to survive, they have to shove it down. What that creates is this seething intensity. And so people will be riveted and frightened because there will be this intensity coming from your performance. A perfect example of this is Leonard Nimoy's portrayal of Spock. One of the most brilliant, I know it's TV and it's cheesy sci-fi, but one of the most brilliant acting personifications in my experience that I've ever seen, because the way he played and the way, if you know the backstory of the Vulcans, is that the Vulcans were very intensely, highly emotional, destructive, passionate, murderous people. And so in order to evolve, they started following what they call the path of logic, which means no emotion. So when you hear a Vulcan say, I have no feeling about that, it's totally untrue. It means that he's choosing not to listen to his feelings, but his intellect instead. And so what made Leonard Nimoy's portrayal so interesting was that he would, as the actor, he would have all these feelings, and then he would purposefully push those feelings down. And that's where the drama was in him. If you just play a robot that has no feelings, that's boring as hell. And that is what the narcissist wants you to believe. That's what the narcissist wants themselves to believe. And they might convince themselves. But the thing I've learned about emotions as an actor is that your nervous system will not know the difference between an imagined reality and a real event. And so this is what method acting is. Method acting is that, you have to play a scene about, your mother dying, but you don't know what that's like, and you can't dredge up any emotions about what would happen if your mom died. So you find something, and your acting teacher says, "Did you ever lose an animal?" "Oh yeah, my dog Spot. When my dog Spot was ran over by a car." Well, when you're saying the line about "I miss my mom so much," think about Spot. And then action, and the camera will go on, and the actor will be reliving Spot's death, but they will say mom instead. You, as the audience member, can't tell the difference because you're projecting anyway. You're projecting your experience of your mom's loss onto that actor's narcissistic experience of his emotions about his dog. And it's dual projection. It's exactly what happens in relationships, especially with borderlines. You're projecting onto them, they're projecting onto you. It's pure narcissism because you're wrapped up in your feelings. Now, having heard this from, according to Sam Vaknin, according to him now, he's not just a narcissist, he's a borderline comorbid NPD. And according to him, what can happen is that the borderline, which is the empathic, in other words, technically the narcissist is not empathic, has no feelings for anybody else, which again I think is not true. I think it's a facade that they tell themselves in order to survive. But according to him, the BPD, NPD comorbid vacillates back and forth, and the NPD side of them can allow themselves to use their empathy and their emotions and then let that fuel their narcissistic abuse. So the idea that narcissists don't have empathy isn't true. They can have empathy. In fact, I would go so far as to say that they could have more empathy than even, a non-NPD person that's full of empathy. Because the emotion is a narcissistic experience. It's a reaction. Emotions are reactions. So when I hear these super empaths talk about, I'm an empath because I'm full of compassion and love and I feel so intensely, what I hear is they're very reactive, which is not a sign of strength. It's a sign of weakness. And I mean that, in other words, their empathic response is their inability to look at the situation and ask themselves, is this appropriate for me right now? No, what they do is, in order to distract themselves from their pain, their insecurity, their loneliness, all the things that are associated with being a codependent, which being an empath is, on my list of, what are the symptoms of codependency? The first one is empath. So what they're doing is they're using that intense emotional reaction to distract themselves from their real feelings, and they tell themselves, I'm here to fix this poor, stupid, fucked up, loser, borderline, whatever, because I'm so full of compassion. And it's the same, here's what the narcissist does. The narcissist, in order to avoid their emptiness, their insecurity, their loneliness, their pain, which is horrific, the infant, in order to survive that, creates an alternative reality. And they create an alternative person. They create a fantasy person that is the opposite of themselves, or their experience of themselves. So if they experience themselves as lonely, as weak, as unlovable, as imperfect, then their counterpart in their fantasy will be all-knowing, all-powerful, will have no weaknesses, and will be, if they see themselves as they're not very funny, they'll be a comedian. If they're not very good with people or social, their alternative will be very social, very outgoing. So it's the exact opposite, and it's an escape. It's an overcompensation to the extreme of their experience of themselves. And that is exactly what I see with the super empath. The super empath is spiritualizing their narcissistic, false feelings of superiority, because if you listen to a super empath, what they will say is, yeah, on one end you have the empath, and on the other end you have the psychopath. And the empath is full of feelings, is full of love, and so we can't help ourselves. The moment that somebody comes in that has any pain, we feel it and we go rushing after them. We can't help ourselves. We have to, help those that can't help themselves. And then they'll go on to describe the narcissist who has no empathy, doesn't care about anybody, that only uses people like, wolves, and they predate on everybody. And then when they have the most, if you listen to it, it sounds like to me they have the most derision for the normal person. The person who's in the middle of the spectrum, who has some empathy, but they can look at the homeless person and they can tell themselves, oh, it's not a big deal, and walk on past. So they can choose when to, they're not going to use you, they're not going to objectify you, but they don't have as much. Whereas I walk past the homeless person and I have to take them in and give them some food, so the condescension and the narcissism surrounding their experience of all of this empathy. And then just like the narcissist, the NPD, just like the NPD, in order to overcome their insecurity, their sadness, their loneliness, their inability to feel loved, their feelings of unworthiness, in order to compensate for that, they take all of this intense feeling that they have, which they can't get rid of because they're not NPDs. They can't get rid of all these feelings. So what they do is they spiritualize it, and then they create the super empath or the earth angel. I'm not really a person. I'm an angel in a human's body, and as an angel, I'm a guardian angel, and I love everybody. Or I'm a super empath, or I'm a star seed. I'm not really a human. I'm actually from Zeta Reticuli, and and so they make themselves impervious and above it all, which is why we like superheroes. Superheroes are narcissists and super empaths. That's why we like them. The evil, the villains are the narcissists, the NPDs, and the heroes are the super empaths going supernova. But it's all the same. It's all narcissism, all of it. The only difference, in my estimation, besides the dissociation and not being able to tell objective reality, which is exclusive to the psychotic, the psychosis end, the only difference is how they deal with their emotions. But it's all narcissistic, all of it. Which is why I'm so derisive towards the super empaths, or when the codependents want to give me the case that, no, you don't understand. I just care about them. I can't stop thinking about my borderline ex because I care about them so much. I know for a fact that that's not the case. I know you don't know that. But because I've gone through and done the work and been on both sides, I now look back and realize that all of that feeling that I had, literally bringing myself to tears when I would think about the pain that my borderline ex went through, and only if she would let me love me. Looking back on it, I realized that was my narcissistic reaction to my own pain and insecurity, and the love I didn't receive as a little kid. And I was projecting that onto her. That's why I couldn't see. I couldn't see. It wasn't that I couldn't see. I was refusing to see that this woman isn't really connecting to me. This woman is not really here. She's not really in this realm. I was just realizing now, there were times she was telling me about these hallucinations she would have. And she would describe it in such a way that I could decide, how I wanted to understand it. So I choose to interpret it as, on a sort of spiritual shamanic vision quest kind of thing. But in reality, looking back on it, she was hallucinating. She would go into these false realities, and she couldn't tell the difference between, her created reality and the real reality. And I chose not to look at that, because if I were to look at that, then I would realize this woman's not capable of having a relationship. So because I had this unmet need to be loved by my mother, I had to see her as being rational. That's why anytime I listen to you guys and you talk about the rage that you have towards your ex, or anything that makes you think about your borderline ex, I say, you're not done. You want them back. And it doesn't matter how much you tell me you don't want them back. No, you don't understand. I'd never want them back. No, I know that you do. I know that you do, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be ruminating about them, or you wouldn't be furious about them, or you wouldn't want to go supernova on them. You wouldn't have those feelings. Because, I've also been in normal relationships where I've been hurt, I've been abused, people have done me wrong, but, I get over it. My ex-wife, I definitely didn't get the fair end of that stick, but so what? It's over, It didn't stick to me. The borderline, on the other hand, if I hadn't done the work, I'd still be thinking about that. Why didn't she love me? Why didn't she accept me? What could I have done differently? I wonder if she's thinking about me. Is she with somebody else right now? And why is she having a relationship with somebody else and she couldn't have one with me? I know I would still be having those same thoughts, because it has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with my mom, who had borderline traits. Okay? So for the borderlines out there, what I wanted to say was, I think you've been dealt a bad hand, because the underlying message that comes from psychology is that if you don't have empathy, then it is guaranteed that you will act out. In other words, you're not going to be able to ever stop splitting because you don't have any empathy. And the same thing, I don't know if there's any narcissists that actually want to heal, but if a narcissist can accept the fact that having empathy is nice, it makes it a lot easier. If you have empathy, and if you have a sense of self, and you don't dissociate and all the things that people with disorders have, if you don't have those things, then it makes it a lot easier to be loving towards somebody, because it's a lot easier when you have loving feelings towards somebody to act lovingly towards them. But it's not necessary. That you can actually take loving actions towards somebody unconditionally without having any feelings for them, and without having any selfish motivations. It is possible to do that. Every single moment that we are alive, we make choices. As my therapist puts it, he says, borderline personality disorder is really a bunch of behaviors. And it took me a while. I had to really let that sink in. He says, it's a bunch of behaviors. It's exactly what it is. It is a defense mechanism. And those, it's a choice that was made. Now, we could talk about, and I'm okay with that, that their brain breaks, that there's a connection that gets broken and never gets fixed. I accept that that's the case. I'm not saying that I think that borderlines and NPDs will be able to have fully functioning emotions and empathy and all that non-cluster Bs have. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's going to be difficult at best. But I don't think it's necessarily impossible. But what happened is at age 2 months or whatever it was, a choice was made. The infant made a choice. Infants, by day 5, this has been proven through testing, by day 5, infants are already manipulating the parents. They already have built within them the need, the understanding. They're interacting and manipulating parents to love them. And so they start to listen and respond, and they learn very quickly. So whenever the thing that happened that broke you, a choice was made. You made a choice. Narcissists the same. The narcissist made the choice. I'm not trying to minimize it. The impulse, when the borderline goes through the impulse of wanting to split, it feels overwhelming to them. And they, because, again, I'm going off of what my borderline ex said. She would talk about, she didn't use the same words, but she was talking about dissociating. And she would say that at times she would feel like this blissful sort of rain would come over her. And I don't know if she saw it or felt it, but it was sort of like this blissful feeling would sort of come over her, and she would sort of kind of tune out, and she couldn't hear what was going on, or she'd lose chunks of time or something like that. But that was behavior. That was something that her brain did for her to protect her. It was doing it for her as an adult when it wasn't necessary, but it was hearkening back to when she must have been an infant or a toddler, when she was being, horrifically, physically, sexually abused, or whatever was going on. Whatever the heck was going on, there would be a defense mechanism that would take over, and she would dissociate. Same thing with splitting. It's an impulse coming from the brain saying, "Oh, it's time to protect the human being that I'm on top of the head here. I'm protecting this human being." Defense mechanism. Defense mechanism 2B, which is splitting. Right. So this impulse comes over you based on what I've heard. Now, I've experienced this because even though I'm not a borderline, I've had similar experiences. I've had my issues with anger throughout my life, so I can relate to this part. The impulse starts to come over you where you feel like you have to, walk out of the room or throw things, whatever it is you do. Start calling the person names, start, raging at them. Whatever it is, there's an impulse that starts to come over you, and then you feel like there's this point of no return, right? And then once you're in it, it's now doing its thing, and you're just watching it. But there's a point in time where you make the decision to accept that and to allow that to happen. It doesn't feel that way because the impulse is so overwhelming, and it's the impulse for survival, which is there is no stronger impulse. It's an inaccurate, ineffective strategy as an adult, but it's coming to the forefront. But you have the choice. At any point in time, you have the choice to stop and take a reality check. You have the choice to stop and say, listen, I have to walk away from you right now, nothing personal. You have the choice to do whatever it is you choose to do. But it's a set of behaviors that it gets neurologically embedded into you, especially if you started doing it at 2 months of age, 3 months of age, and it builds up, and then it becomes so ingrained in the neurology that it becomes second nature, it becomes instinct, and you don't technically have any control over it. So that's what my therapist is saying when he says borderline personality disorder is just a set of behaviors. Now, the reason why I tell people to do the 12 steps is because the 12 steps has something that psychology and religion, including spirituality, cannot give you, which is it gives, the one thing that you hear over and over again in 12-step groups is a phrase called contrary action. And it means to do the exact opposite of everything inside of you, your strongest impulse. You see this most prominent in people who have chemical addictions, alcoholism and drug addiction. This phrase of contrary action, they'll tell you has saved their lives. The thing about codependence, if they don't have these other kinds of addictions, codependence is an addiction, by the way. It's just you're not addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever else. You're addicted to, the craziness of being in dysfunctional relationships. You're addicted to the pain. You're addicted to the endless chase of somebody that never turns around and loves you back. You're addicted to that. We won't get into why that is, but you're addicted to it. But the thing is that you won't die tomorrow. The alcoholic, the drug addict, they'll die tomorrow if they don't learn how to take contrary action. When everything inside of them wants to pick up that jug of wine, or everything in them wants to go get that fix, they know they might not make it to the next day. And so they do everything in their power to do the opposite. And that is a habit. That's an action. When you it's a behavior. When you repeat that behavior, like any other habit, everything else takes repetition. Repetition, it creates new neural pathways. And so there's a battle in the beginning between the new neural pathways that you're trying to put down and the old ones. And the old ones are much stronger. And so if you don't put continuous discipline and effort towards it, the new neural pathways will not win out. This is where spirituality comes in. So this is why in 12 steps they tell you to have a power greater than yourself. It doesn't matter what that means. It could mean electricity. It could mean the ocean. It could mean love. It could mean Kate Moss's tits. It could mean anything. As long as it's something that you think is more powerful than you, that is something that when you need to take contrary action, you reach out and you think of the power of electromagnetism, and you go, okay, power of electromagnetism, give me the strength to do this opposite action. It feels like I'm going to die. And somewhere out of somewhere, you don't know where, when you look back, I did it. I pulled it off. It gives you confidence to keep doing that. Okay, next time it feels like I'm going to die, I'm going to do the exact opposite. And you're usually being given instructions by somebody else. Your sponsor is giving you instructions, and they're telling you to do something that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Why the hell would I do that? But you do it anyway. So what he's saying is that the way, my take on that even further is that if the definition of somebody being borderline or narcissist is that they don't have empathy, which I agree, they don't. Borderlines, I'm sorry to tell you, but you suffer from a form of narcissistic personality disorder, which means that you vacillate between what you believe to be empathy, which is actually infantile need, it's intense emotion, which is, of course, empathetic, because in order to get mommy's love, you have to be empathetic. You have to be able to guess mommy's feelings in order to be able to manipulate her into loving you. There's nothing wrong with that. All kids do it. That's how the human being survives. But you're an adult now. So it doesn't translate well. So you think you have empathy. The adult you're with thinks that you're super empathic, because they've never seen this before, but they don't realize what they're experiencing is infantile need. But you're able to experience it as love and affection. And it doesn't mean that you don't have loving, kind, warm feelings. It doesn't mean that. It just means that, it's coming from that old infantile vibration of that. So, but just because you have that doesn't mean that when you swing to the opposite end of the spectrum, because that's the other end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is psychopathic lack of empathy. Because there's no way, if there's no way that you can do that kind of splitting without having any, because that's what separates borderline splitting from normal, even neurotic fights and breakups. And, neurotic people and healthy people accuse people of doing things they didn't do. But you can talk it over with them. Even if they're upset and you can't talk to them today, you can wait until tomorrow because they have an identity and they can remember, they don't dissociate. They'll go, okay, yeah, I feel a little better. All right, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little upset last night, and then they can work through it. You guys can't do that because if you could, you wouldn't be borderlines. What makes you borderline is not the level of empathy or psychopathy you experience. What makes you borderlines is the actions that you take. That's what defines you as a borderline or a narcissist. Because as I've said, I've had no shortage of experiences with people, especially in romantic relationships, where there wasn't one shred of empathy in me. In fact, I had completely opposite feelings, but I had enough awareness to know that what this person really needs right now is this, and what's going to make them happy is this. Or even on a selfish level, what's going to get me laid later tonight is if I say, yes, your ass looks great in those jeans. It's totally overrated, empathy. It's great when it works for you. But as I said before, it can actually work against you. The narcissist can use their empathy to mask their intentions. Intentions and empathy are two different things. And this is something that I think is missed in psychological discussions, because psychologists, when I hear them, I'm only listening to them on YouTube, so maybe I'm not fully educated on it. But the way they talk about it is that, borderlines and narcissists, they lack empathy. And so that's the problem, is that they don't have empathy. That's not the problem. It's not true, but it's not the problem. I'll go even further. Again, I believe the narcissist when the narcissist says, I have no feelings for anybody. It's dead, it's flatlined, but that is a choice that was made. It was a choice that was made that has a neurological response. It's a muscle that hasn't been worked, and it's a defense mechanism. I am willing, I don't know for a fact, but I'm willing to believe that if there was a narcissist that wanted to heal and was willing to continuously make different choices, if they wanted to, they might be able to dredge up some feelings. But it's possible, like with the Vulcans, the Vulcans, if their feelings come to the surface, it starts to destroy them because they have too many feelings. It might be the case with the narcissist as well. I honestly don't know. And it's sort of the case with the borderline. But that's what I really wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk, just this, again, my main concern is for the codependents, and the codependents who think that their empathy means something, and it doesn't. And the codependents who think that their empathy is somehow always good and always healing and always constructive. And that empathy is the opposite of narcissism, which it's not. In fact, the most narcissistic people I know of, I didn't say narcissists, narcissistic. The most narcissistic people I know are extremely empathetic. Because in order to get what they want, they have to know what somebody's thinking. Borderlines and NPDs are extremely empathetic. They're psychic. They know what you want. They know what you're feeling. So this idea that they don't have any feelings, they can't relate to you. I understand when they say, I don't understand when, I have to pretend to have what that person's feeling, but those are usually things like joy. Now, narcissists have plenty of rage. They have no shortage of rage, so we can't say they have no feelings because they have plenty of rage. Borderlines have no shortage of rage. So it's not that they don't have feelings, it's just There are feelings that, the feeling that would destroy them and the feeling that they have the least experience in, especially for the narcissist, is happiness and love. So they have to pretend. There was a picture, I wish I had it for you. It's a picture of Donald Trump. You'll know which one I'm talking about. It's the one of him hugging the American flag. And he has a smile on his face, but I can tell that he's faking it because it's this. Have you noticed? That's how Donald Trump smiles. I tend to think, I firmly believe Donald Trump is NPD, BPD comorbid. Definitely. And I know because being who I am, being the codependent tough guy that I had to survive a lot of abuse as a kid. I had an older brother that I had to be very careful around, and if I showed too many emotions, I got my ass kicked. Or if I didn't get my ass kicked, I got ridiculed. So I had to not have any emotions. In fact, I was, one of the things that made me good at martial arts and other things like that is that I had a really good poker face. And I could intimidate the hell out of somebody. And I learned, you just turn your emotions off. So even though I'm not MPD, I can sort of take myself there. I don't need to anymore, but back when I thought I needed to, I could do that. And so I know what it's like. When I see that, I know exactly what a fake smile looks like. And it's actually hostility. It's hostility, it's arrogance, it's condescension, it's superiority. Now, if you notice, that's how Donald Trump smiles. When he has to smile for the camera, he goes, it's not a real smile. Narcissists have to try and figure out what it looks like to really smile, and you can see they're not home. There's something's wrong in their face, in their eyes. They're faking it. You can tell they're faking it. But that's because those are feelings they don't have any experience in. I don't think it's because they don't have them or they're incapable of having them. I think it's a behavioral choice that's so deeply ingrained that they might fall apart if they were to actually have other kinds of feelings. Again, I'm just talking out loud here, but again, the bottom line is it doesn't matter. I'll shut up with this and I'll go to see if there's any questions, but Spock is a really great example. Spock knows how to act. His logic, again, we're talking about a fictional person, but we could say the Buddhist or whatever, but Spock's logic, his behavior of acting with logic, he would always be thinking ahead without any selfish intent for himself. He would be thinking about how his behavior is going to be constructive for the whole. What is best for the whole in this time? Not in a codependent way, because all of you codependents who think I do that, no, you're actually doing that because you want something. You're in denial of the fact that you narcissistically want love, attention, and approval, and you want to take people hostage with all of your good acts. Whenever you want to take care of the borderline, you're trying to take them hostage. How do I know? Because I was there. I know what you're doing. Spock is a fictional character, but you could trust your life with Spock. If you were with Spock, even though he's flatlined, he has no emotions for you, you live, you die, he has no feelings about it whatsoever, you know that he would sacrifice his life for you, and that he would do what was in your best interest, and he wouldn't think of himself. And that tells you that we can choose, whether we have feelings or not, whether we have empathy or not, we can choose to act in ways that benefit the other person. So as I said, I think it works against, I think it does borderlines a disservice, because when they hear it, borderlines are full of here's what is so important about this. Borderlines are so filled with self-judgment. They're filled with self-hatred, shame, and judgment, and everything they do is based off that shame, that fear of being shamed, that fear of being rejected, that self-judgment. They're not good enough. They're not loving enough, even their grandiosity. My borderline ex had grandiosity about, she would say, oh, everybody wants me. And it was obvious that that was a overreaction to nobody wants me. You know, that was her narcissistic, perfectionistic way of dealing with the fact that she felt totally unlovable. Borderlines have this. So when we start talking about, oh, borderlines lack empathy, that's why they split, and that's what makes them incapable of being in relationships. This is why borderlines, when they come on my channel, and I'm sure everywhere else, want to make the argument that, no, that's wrong. I am actually filled with empathy. And they get distracted from what's important. As I said, it doesn't matter to me whether you have empathy or not. What I care about is how you treat me. So if you have empathy and that empathy gives you the ability to give me love and affection and treat me nice, great, I'm happy. If you don't have empathy, but you still treat me with love and affection and with kindness, I'm going to appreciate that. I only care how you treat me. That's all that matters to me. I mean, I care about how you feel. I don't want you to be upset or in pain. But in terms of the relationship and me staying in the relationship, I only care about how you treat me. That's the only thing that matters. So when we tell a borderline that, you know, the thing that's most important, and this isn't set out right, it's the context of the narrative, which the super empath has co-opted for their narcissism, which is on one end you have the empath who's full of feeling and sensitivity and feelings for others, and on the other end you have somebody who has no feelings or sensitivity. The person who has no feelings and sensitivity by definition will do bad things, and the person who has empathy by definition will do good things. When a borderline hears that, it justifies their destructive behavior because, well, I have no empathy anyway. You've been telling me I don't have any empathy, and I'm starting to feel disempathic right now. I'm starting to feel like I'm going to split. So you've already told me I can't be loving to you when I feel this way. So I'm just going to, and then it's a justification. One borderline on here said something to the effect of, as we were chatting on one of these live things, said, I can't guarantee that I'll never split again. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, I know you can't. That's the problem. And what it means is that the impulse to split, there will come a time when the impulse to split will feel stronger than any willpower they have. Now, this is why the 12 steps are so important, and maybe not for borderlines, but for codependence. In the AA program, there's this really great quote where it says, there will come a time when there will be no mental defense against that first drink, which means there will be no mental defense against the impulse to drink. In other words, there will come a time when you will not have any intellectual power to talk yourself out of taking the action of picking up that drink and drinking it. We can apply that to borderlines. There will come a time, what she was saying is there will come a time when I will have no mental defense against the impulse to split. And that is absolutely true. That doesn't mean that you can't prevent it from happening. I'm not a borderline. I don't know what they need to do to survive, but they need to find some equivalent of the higher power of the 12 steps, which allows them the ability to know that emotionally they do not have any control and that mentally they have no willpower, and yet something beyond them must give them the discipline to not take the action, to not pick up the first drink. You know, alcoholics and drug addicts in their 12-step group, they've got this really good thing, which is the only thing they have to do is just not drink and not take drugs. If it's a sex addict, you know, I just got to go through the day and not, you know, have destructive sex or watch porn or whatever it is they do. If it's gambling anonymous, I just have to go today and not gamble. Just have to go one day at a time. And that's an absolute. They can't do it. So I don't know what borderlines need, but if they can find that one thing where just no matter what, I don't split today. I'm not going to split today. And no matter what it takes, just that's it. I'm going to get through today and I'm not going to split. If they can do that and keep that behavior going on a day-to-day basis, they can live the rest of their lives out and they technically won't be borderlines. Because as I've said before, what makes somebody a borderline is the fact that they split. That's it. The other stuff that is used to define borderline personality disorder, the emotional dysregulation, the dissociation, the intense anxiety, the whatever else that I don't know about because I'm not a borderline, those things to me don't define a person. And you can have all of that. I will still love you if you have all of that. As long as I know you're not going to split on me and do something to me that I didn't deserve, I won't care about any of that. As your friend or as your partner, it makes it difficult to be somebody's partner and deal with that. But, it doesn't matter. So, I don't know. Maybe I think it's important. So borderline, stop trying to tell me why you're not a psychopath because you have empathy, because your empathy is just as toxic as the codependence. Codependence empathy is extremely toxic. You know how I know that? Because when they don't get what they want, they turn into a super empath and they go supernova on you and they start looking to destroy you, which is exactly like a borderline. The only difference is they're worse than a borderline because they have an identity and they don't dissociate. So I hold them more responsible for their going supernova than I do for a borderline splitting, because it's a choice. The codependent is choosing to become and act like a psychopath, but they're going to justify it with all of their spirituality and all of their, I'm a starseed, I'm not really human, I'm an angel in human form, and all of that garbage. All right, so I'm happy to take a look at your questions and comments. And before I go any further, if you're new to the channel, the 4 things you need to do to heal from your relationship, your toxic relationship. 1, no contact, which means that you make it impossible for them to contact you. If you don't make it impossible, you haven't gone no contact. 2, work all 12 steps of coda.org or whatever 12-step group you want to go to, and then sponsor somebody else. You have to work all 12 steps with a sponsor. I forgot to put that in there. If you don't work it with a sponsor, it doesn't count. And then you got to sponsor somebody else. 3, get a therapist. If you don't get a therapist, it's going to be a lot harder for you to take a look at your unconscious, maybe even look into getting to group therapy. That's been very helpful to me. My group therapy is tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that. And then 4th is, which is really step 11, daily meditation. Whatever that is for you, which is tapping into whatever that power is that's greater than you, whether it's Zarkon the Magnificent or Jesus or love or electricity or the sun, God, or whatever it is. As long as it ain't you. Those are the 4 things you need to do. In my experience, which is all I have, if you don't do those 4 things, you won't fully heal. You'll always be ruminating or angry or in pain, or you'll be a target for another one. So if you want to heal, you got to do those 4 things. And bear in mind, I'm going to know if you've done the 4 things or not. Not because I'm psychic, but because I can tell, because I've done them. It's, anybody else who's done them would also be able to tell. All right, let's see. Anything here? Dora, question. He left me saying we had everything and you ruined it. Now my thought was you had everything and you didn't give a damn. Am I the narcissist? I don't know, but my point is, you're still complaining about somebody not giving you what you wanted. And we want to be in the place where we're not affected by that. So it makes me want to ask you, what are you doing to heal? Because I don't see it. I relate to the pain. I relate to the anger, the jealousy, the feelings of being betrayed and all of that. And if I take just your word for it and your version of what happened, yes, what he did was mean and horrible and you didn't deserve it, et cetera, et cetera. Are you asking me, am I the narcissist? I don't know. Are you feeling guilty? Look, I don't care. Like I said, your feelings are not what's important here. You can have all the negative feelings you want. You can have guilt, you can have anger, you can have confusion. That's really what's not important here. Although you should be conscious of all of your feelings. Don't get me wrong. You need to be conscious of all of them. You need to accept yourself with them and love yourself with them. But all of the energy that's going into him and what he did and what he said is energy that could be going towards you living your life. But you won't be able to free up that RAM in your hard drive until you do the work. And when you do the work, you won't be asking me this question. You won't care. He said what he said, you said what you said. If he's a borderline, it doesn't matter what he said because he's not rational anyway. So why are you getting upset over an irrational person saying something that wasn't accurate? That's the definition of mental illness. They're not clued into reality. Instead of getting hurt, you go, if you're confident within yourself, and it's okay if you're not, because if you're with them, you have to throw your confidence away in order to stay in the relationship. You have to throw your confidence away just to get in a relationship with them. You don't know that because of whatever your background is, but it doesn't matter. If you're confident, he says something that's not rational, you go, well, that's really painful, but that's not true. That doesn't apply to me. I know who I am. So whatever it is you want to do, you want to either argue with me about you being a narcissist, or you're actually wondering if you're a narcissist. By the way, narcissists don't wonder if they're narcissistic. The fact that you're talking about him, that's what's not serving you. So the 4 things. Do the 4 things, you won't be asking me these questions, or yourself. But it is normal to have these feelings now. It's normal to be asking these questions now. Just as it's normal when you have a bacterial infection that, the thing swells up and it's red and it hurts. It's normal. It's not what you want. It's not healthy, but it's normal. So I'm not judging you for it. I'm just telling you it's ultimately a waste of time. No matter what answer I give you, it's not going to help you. And as I said, it doesn't even matter if you are the narcissist. If the whole point of it is the actions that we take, if we're capable of learning how to take actions without agenda, then it doesn't matter what we are. Because we're not judged on our feelings, we're judged on our actions. This is the irony of it. When you were a baby, what was supposed to happen is you were supposed to be judged by your feelings. If a little baby doesn't move or doesn't make noise or doesn't cry, they go, what's wrong with him? They'll even slap you around to see if they can get you to cry. In other words, your value and your worth is based on your feelings, your physical and emotional, and to have a bunch of feelings, to cry and all that, and to have temper tantrums and to laugh and to just have feelings. That's all. They don't have to make any sense. They're not supposed to be sophisticated. You're just supposed to have a lot of feelings. If you have a lot of feelings, you're healthy and you're loved for that. As an adult, that doesn't work. You're only loved based on your actions and the effects of those actions. People that care about your feelings and will at times find ways to be there for you with your feelings. But on the whole, you're judged on your actions and the effects of those actions. So that's the ironic thing, is that both borderlines and codependents want the same thing. The reason why they're attracted to each other is because they both want to be seen and judged by their feelings, which is why both borderlines and codependents constantly say, I'm an empath, I'm full of feelings. They want to be judged by that. And this is what I keep telling borderlines. It doesn't matter to me how much empathy you have. If you split on me, it's worthless. Your empathy was completely useless. It didn't give you the ability to act lovingly towards me when you were splitting on me. So That's the irony of it. As an adult, it doesn't matter what you feel, it matters what you do. Now, in order to be able to have the ability to act without feeling and without agenda, in order to be able to do that, you have to have an identity. This is called having integrity. Integrity, you can't have integrity if you don't have an identity. People will say, the only thing I have left is my integrity, which means that, again, Spock, gives his life for Captain Kirk, and he says, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. He's saying that, as much as I want to survive, my integrity tells me I have to sacrifice myself for the rest of the crew. You know what I mean? His actions are what's important, and he knows that. His actions are what's going to help everybody. But in order to do that, you have to have a sense of self-love. You have to accept all of your thoughts and your feelings. My favorite affirmation, there's only one affirmation that I recommend, because I think most affirmations are useless. The only one that I recommend is, even though I have this feeling, I thoroughly and completely accept myself. Memorize that, because I go through it, you'll go through it. When you have impulses or feelings that feel like they're going to kill you, and you just want to die, or you want to take that action, you want to pick up the phone and call the borderline, or you want to split on your partner, or you want to put a needle in your neck, whatever it is, say that. Even though I have this feeling, I thoroughly and completely accept myself. You could even replace feeling with impulse. Even though I have this impulse, I thoroughly and completely accept myself. Because that is what a healthy childhood is supposed to give you. It's supposed to give you the ability that no matter what's happening, no matter what you're feeling, you have integrity in yourself to take the action that is best for everybody. What else? I think, Sonia, that may be true, maybe not be true. I heard it a little differently. You say originally, you're right, this severe form of mental illness. You mean borderline personality disorder. Yeah. And I think there's some accuracy to that, because borderlines do seemingly, again, it's a pendulum. Borderlines do, on one side of the pendulum, they swing into psychosis, or, they have empathy. So they might have difficulty, but you can talk to the borderline, because listen, everybody, my borderline ex, when she wasn't splitting, was phenomenal. She was one of the smartest, one of the most intelligent, sensitive. She was incredibly intuitive. She was a great counselor. And, there were times when she took care of me emotionally that were beyond what anybody could just intuitively been able to do. This is the curse of the borderline. The super empaths out there calling themselves super empaths, they're not super empaths. Borderlines are super empaths. They when they don't have a fear or an agenda, because they do. The moment that a fear pops in or an agenda pops in, they lose their psychic ability. This is the thing about borderlines. They're either 100% on or 100% off. But when they're not afraid and they don't have an agenda, they're able to really just be there for you in ways that, a lot of people can't. That's the sad part about it. That's what makes them so lovable. You fall so deeply in love with that. And then it's worse because then they split on you. So it's you get hurt worse than if you were with somebody else, because they'd never pull you in, and you would never throw away your defenses, which is the sad part, because what ends up happening with a lot of codependents is they start trying to become narcissists. They start trying to find a way to then feed off of the borderline's loving nature when they're, in their infantile stage. But then they cut off their empathy because they know the borderline is going to split, so I won't get hurt. And of course, they never do it. They don't have the ability to be narcissistic, but they try. And so what ends up happening is once the borderline is done with them and they get discarded, then they end up being pseudo narcissists. They will then take their narcissism out on other people, and they'll be narcissistic towards other people. It's part of the fallout that a lot of people don't see. I know I experienced it, and I see it in others when they talk about it. And that's one of the sad things. Somebody that maybe they were codependent, they weren't all that narcissistic. They, did their time with the borderline. They come out and they're narcissistic. And it's sad. But the thing is that they're not immune to their own narcissism. So they end up dying inside. It's a really horrible thing. Anyway, that's why people need to do the work. Anyway, I forgot what caused me to say that, but anyway, that's whatever I said. KT, let me see. I'm not sure you're agreeing with what I said. You say, I agree you can love someone unconditionally. However, you cannot love someone in a relationship unconditionally. Free to pass, to cheat, lie, etc. I mean, at some point, that everybody's different. I was with a woman that had no jealousy. There was a woman I dated, she had no jealousy whatsoever. Meaning that she wouldn't be fazed if I had said, yeah, I just came back from Vegas and I had sex with 10 hookers, don't worry, I wore a condom. She would have gone, oh, that's awesome, tell me all about it. She wouldn't have bothered her. She would have just, all she would have cared was, oh, do you still love me? That's all she would have cared about. So, some people, it's not about whether most people don't like to be cheated on. I don't. But I don't know that I agree with that you can't love somebody unconditionally. I think that, I think maturity gives some people let me put it to you this way. This is, again, I'm quoting my therapist. He said, there's, I love you because I need you. And then there's, I need you because I love you. So love is unconditional. True love is unconditional. With my fiance who passed away, whom I still to this day, I still love her more than any being in the universe. What gave me the greatest happiness was to see her happy. When I saw the look on her face when she was happy, my whole life came together. And it wasn't because I did it, It wouldn't have mattered what made her happy. And I learned that from her because she was that way with me. She truly did love me unconditionally. And as it turned out, the thing that would make her smile with happiness was when I was happy. So it was this great, we'd feed off of each other, and it was just, I've never experienced anything like that before or since. So I do think that unconditional love is, I wouldn't have thought so. If you had talked to me, whenever it was 10 years ago or whatever, I would have said, no, I don't think that's possible. But I actually do think it's possible. I didn't think I was capable of loving somebody unconditionally. I didn't think anybody was capable of loving me. But I have loved unconditionally, and I've been loved unconditionally. That's the thing that actually attracted me to the borderline, because the borderline looked like she had unconditional love for me. And we could argue whether or not it was, but it was in the love bombing phase. And there was something missing about it, but it was so similar to that, I wanted to believe it. And that's what I was still mourning over I was projecting onto her and transferring onto her my feelings I had for my fiance that passed away. So I'm not sure I agree 100% with what you're saying, although I don't know exactly all the context you're saying. But I think it's true for the most part. In relationship, most people are selfish. People do things, we get involved because they look good, they feel good. When I think about who I want to be with next, I'm thinking about how they're going to benefit my life. So I understand that. I think I understand what you're saying. That's it. Nothing else. So no other questions. Nothing else to say. All right. So I had a lot of things to say. Again, if you're recovering from a destructive relationship, the only way I know how to heal from the relationship is to do the 4 things. And if you come onto my channel, I am gonna probably know whether you've done them or not. Anyway, so that's it for me, guys. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, and I guess this is one way that we can, loving unconditionally and living unconditionally. Because again, if we're talking about Spock, this is somebody who lives unconditionally. In other words, they live for what is best for everybody. Now, as it turns out, in my experience, what the best for everybody includes what is best for me. So if you ever find, even hearing myself say that, I found myself going to a dichotomy of, well, that sounds selfish. But the only time that what I want is hurtful for others is when what I want is actually selfish. It's coming from some place of fear. When I go after what my soul wants, from a spiritual perspective, which might not be what somebody else wants me to do, don't get me wrong. Me doing what is best for me spiritually might not fit with somebody's agenda for me, and it may make them very upset. They could potentially put a gun to their head and blow their brains out, if they had a strong enough reaction. But the truth is that if I go after what truly makes me happy without any fear, without any greed, without any agenda, that will always help every other conscious being in the universe. And that's what I mean when I say to live without agenda, to live unconditionally. And that's what I mean when I say to love unconditionally. It means that you have enough awareness through whatever means to know that what is best for everybody right now is if I do this. For example, when you're with a borderline that's untreated, the kindest thing you can do for them is to tell them, I love you, this relationship is damaging to me, I'm going to go no contact. I think you might have borderline personality disorder, but that's up to you to follow through on. I hope you understand. I won't be communicating with you again. As horrible as that sounds, that is the kindest thing. You will feel horrible. You will feel guilty. You will go through all of the sadness and the pain of loss. So you won't be operating from your selfish, self-centered need, but you also won't be operating from your guilt or your selfish, self-centered need to be there for them and to fix them and to have them love you and appreciate you. You will know that it's a risk. They might harm themselves. They might not. But, if somebody agreed with me, but I've said this before. If everybody responded to borderlines from an authentic place, like whenever a borderline split on them, whether they're friends or lovers, if everybody had enough empowerment within themselves to say, hey man, that's not okay. What you just did was beyond normal, disagreement, and I can't have anything to do with you. I'm sorry, but I can't have you in my life. If everybody did that, more borderlines would go get help. So when you stay with a borderline, you're keeping them from the healing that they desperately need. They won't even seek out help because why should they? You're there to take up the slack for them. So true unconditional love means knowing what the right thing is to do, even if you can't stand it. But that's also going to be helpful for you. You can't be good to others and harm yourself. And you can't be truly good to yourself and harm others. And finding that balance is really what everything is all about, whether it's spirituality or philosophy psychology. We're all trying to find that same integrity of self. All right, that's it for me. I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Take care, and I will see you when I see you.